On today's episode of uintagarage, we're going to be doing the Borgeson steering shaft upgrade, as well as the lower steering column bearing on this 88 K5 Blazer. I'm Joe, and this is uintagarage. When people talk about doing a steering shaft upgrade on a square body, generally they say, we're going to do the XJ shaft upgrade. That is a great option if you're on a budget. The other option would be this Borgeson one right here. It's a little more spendy, but as you can see, it's a pretty heavy duty unit. The whole purpose of this upgrade right here is to remove the rag joint that you usually have down on this end. You can see it replaces it here with a U-joint, less slop, less play. Let's get this project started. For the first step, make sure your tires are straight, then make sure your steering wheel is straight and go ahead and lock that in position. This will ensure everything stays straight through the whole process and is exactly lined up how it was before. We're gonna go ahead and remove this bolt. That is a 7/16 12-point bolt. We're gonna remove that. And we'll come up here to the top and we will remove this bolt right down there, which is a 15mm. We'll go ahead and get that out and come back. Vast majority of people will come after this bolt from up above. I happen to have a hole right here in my wheel well, so I can come at it from right here and go ahead and remove this bolt. Now I'll loosen this upper bolt. Now remove this bolt. Just like that. Now we need to pry the shaft off of the steering column. If you run into a situation like I did where your shaft will not collapse, go ahead and get your torch out and heat up right here at this joint. It'll melt the little plastic holder inside, and then you can collapse it. Now that I have melted the plastic retainer in the center of the steering shaft, I'm going to pry up on the steering shaft to collapse it. Pry down here by the steering box. You will notice I haven't bolted the rag joint. You do not need to do that. I did this because I thought I could take a shortcut, but that didn't work out. So, melt that plastic retainer and push up on the steering shaft to collapse it. Once the steering shaft is collapsed, go ahead and grab the top part of the steering shaft and wiggle it loose from the steering column. Now that we have the old steering shaft removed, I'd like to show you the difference here. This is a rag joint. Apparently this has quite a bit of slop and play to it. We're going to be replacing with this universal joint. Now you can see the steering shaft bearing. I want you to notice something here. This groove is exposed. You can see the end of the column is moving. They all do this. They all wear out. It's very, very common to see this. So what we've got to do is pull this cap off. Now this slides off. And you can see that old bearing, like I said before, it is not up in the plastic housing like it's supposed to be. And you should be able to kind of pry that out of there. What I'm going to do first is scrape all the junk off here, because there's no need to try and go through all of this and fight it. Now that I've got this all cleaned off, I used a little bit of fine grit sandpaper to really polish it so it's nice and clean. Go ahead and start gently prying this down the shaft. I'm taking a little bit on each side. You can see it start to move. Do a little bit down here. Okay, if you run out of leverage like I've done, grab a wrench and stick it back here, and then you've got something to pry against. So let me go grab a wrench. Okay, I got an 1 1/8" wrench here, and I can actually use the wrench to pry down on this quite a bit. Now that we're this far, I can go back to using my pry bar to finish working this off. After 20 minutes of fighting with this, trying to get it off the end of the shaft, I decided to cut a notch in this, and then I can hopefully just beat that bearing the rest of the way off. Okay. Now that we've got the bearing off, I'm going to go ahead and take some fine sandpaper again and polish this up to make sure there's no marks, no burrs, and no dirt. It'll help the new bearing go on a lot easier. Now that this is all cleared off and clean, we're going to go ahead and remove the plastic insert that the bearing sits in. Should just pop right out. You want to get some grease down inside those bearings. So I don't have one of those like press things that'll actually push the grease up in there. So I'm just going to dip the bearing in the grease and then kind of pack it down in there with my fingers just to get it in there. It doesn't need to be a whole lot, just enough to kind of give it a little lubrication. And then I'm going to lube around this edge here to help get the bearing in this plastic holder down here. Now this is a super tight fit, so what you've got to do, now that you've got this grease in here, put that bearing on top of this, and then you push down real hard and it'll kind of clip into place. I know you guys couldn't see that, but you could at least hear that click. That click is that bearing sitting down inside that, just like it's supposed to. I'm gonna put a little grease on the shaft here to help that bearing slide back up into place. It was a pain to get off. I imagine it's gonna be a pain to get back on. Okay. Now we're gonna grab a block of wood and a hammer and tap this into place. Once you get it on about that far, we've got to switch and use a socket to gently tap it on the rest of the way. Once we use the socket to get this about halfway on, it just slid the rest of the way on by hand. You can see it's in place now. That's way more secure than it was before. Yep. The whole way in. Now I'm going to grab that outer cover and that C-clip that goes right there. Now it's worth pointing out there are these little grooves in the top of this that need to line up with the grooves on your steering shaft so that the retainer can go back in there. It looks like this is going to take a little persuading to get it up high enough. So I will persuade it with my brass hammer just ever so slightly. Go ahead and put the metal clip back on. This wraps up the steering column bearing. Now back to the steering shaft. So this is a universal kit that they send you. I know it's going to be a little bit long for the Blazer, so what I'm going to do is remove this upper U-joint here. And then we'll install this lower portion down here on the steering box and mark this so we can cut it down on this end. Now I need to come down to this end here and remove this. And we'll install this end on the steering box side and measure. And what I want to do is first telescope this out as far as it'll go. Then we will mark right here where it's flush with the end of the steering column. Then that'll give us enough room to collapse this down to install it, and also it'll extend the whole way back out. So on the steering box side, they have you, it's hard to see with this angle, but they have you push that on until the splines are even with the flat surface of this right here. And then just go ahead and tighten it down, just snug it so that we can extend it out and mark where we need to cut. I've extended the shaft as far as I can. I'm going to mark it, cut it here, then I'm going to have to reinstall it and mark it again and cut it one more time. I made my first cut on the shaft. Now I've reinstalled it and I've extended it as far as it'll go, and I need to make another cut right here. I need to cut it flush with the shaft coming out of the steering column. That'll allow for maximum collapsibility on the shaft and make installation much, much easier. So I'll go ahead and mark this and cut it right now. Now that you've got the shaft cut to length, what you need to do is install the joint back on this end here. And what they tell you to do is push it through until it's flat. It's going to be kind of hard for me to show this, but it's flush again with this surface here. Okay. Then what you do is you take one of these long bolts here and you tighten it up. What you've got to do is tighten it enough that it leaves a mark on that shaft, okay? And go ahead and tighten up the other side too. Same thing, just make a mark on the shaft. Perfect. Then you back them back out. And then I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole. You can see right here that left a mark there and there. So I'm going to drill a hole right here. It's 3/8. You only go through one side of the tube, not both, just one. So I'll go ahead and drill that out now. Now that I've got that hole drilled, I'm going to go ahead and put this joint back on. And then this longer screw will go the whole way in. Now before I finish tightening this up, I am going to add just a little blue Loctite to this because I really don't want this to come loose later. So put a little blue Loctite on it and continue on tightening this down. Now remember, this only goes through one side of the shaft. The other side kind of clamps onto. So snug that up nice and tight. And I will install this one. Same thing, put a little blue Loctite on there. I like this gel personally, it's less messy. And I will go ahead and tighten this up. So it is nice and snug. And I will add the lock nuts. And this is a 1/2 inch. So now that's in there, go ahead and snug these down. Okay, let's go install this in the vehicle. Now I'm going to install the upper half of this shaft. Slides in there. Now we'll tighten the bolt on the bottom side. Now we'll tighten these nuts down. Now we're going to extend the shaft down and connect it to the steering box down there. Okay, we got to back it up just a little bit so that the splines are even with the inside surface there. It's hard to see from this camera angle, but you're looking up here. Make sure that these splines line up. Then you tighten this Allen down as tight as it'll go. It'll leave a nice mark on that gear. We're going to back it back out. And remove this again. Okay, it's a little hard to see with the camera angle, but that Allen made a nice mark right here on top, okay? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna file just a little flat spot right here for that Allen to sit in. Now I got pretty lucky here and mine happened to line up with the flat spot that was already there. So I'm just making a little bit deeper groove here. Okay, that should be enough that it'll catch right in there. Let's do the final install. Now we'll tighten this. For the final step, we'll tighten this lock nut. Well, there you have it. We've got a brand new steering column bearing installed and the Borgeson steering shaft upgrade done. As you can see here, the steering is now real tight. It's going to be very responsive off-road, which is exactly what I'm looking for. If you found this video at all useful or helpful, do us a favor and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Joe, and this is Uintagarage.